guys, it's Sherlock here. So with chatting to a few of the new company members, I've realized how many people are out there that don't actually have a good understanding of where they should be starting with dungeons. So I thought I'd do a quick video going over all the information I made for the M11 page, to give people a bit of a rough idea of a direction to head what they should be running gear-wise and bits and pieces. So we'll be using my copy of the spreadsheet for it, but to find all this information, it's still on the M11 page. If you go into the build section, then up the top here, you've got all your different tabs, a DPS healer, sandworm, hatchery, and info. So that's where you can find this information. I might look at doing my own page so we can update it in the future, because I no longer have access to update any of the information. But for now, we'll go through all this and hopefully it can help you guys out a bit. So on our info tab, we've got our important buffs, our team compositions, our mob type weaknesses, and our armor weights. So this is where you want to be starting when you're planning and take a little bit more seriously in the dungeons. These are your consumables and buffs that you're going to want before you go in. Trophies, the mid-tier ones, are they the basics? So basics, they're the 4% each. Basics minors, I should know this. They're fine. You don't have to have mages. If you can afford them, it's great. If you can't, the next tier down's fine. It's going to give you an extra 12% base damage. If you need to know what trophies you want for each dungeon, I believe we have a setup here somewhere. Right here. Like I said, informal video. Yep, mob type weaknesses. So, Angry Earth trophies, Ancient, Corrupted, Lost, Human, and Beast. These are called wildlife trophies if you're trying to find them. These are the dungeons that they will be relevant within. So if you're running any of these dungeons, come up the top. That's what trophies you're going to want, and if you don't have your ultimate combat trophies. So you've got your trophies, you've got your coding set up. Next thing, you're going to want your honing stones. That's power. So that counts towards your own power cap. So if you're on a weapon like a greatsword, a spear, or a void gauntlet, you're going to allow a lot of self and power. So if you're poor, you could tone it down to the strong honing stones. Otherwise, if you're running something like rapier, you're really going to be wanting to run that powerful honing stone for that 7%. If you've got your lasting consumption, or even empowered on your amulet, that's going to help buff that a lot longer too. So that's very helpful. Ward potions. So ward potions are something you want to use in big clumps. So if you're doing large pools of mobs and enemies, let's say you're dragging 2 or 3 groups together, drop a ward potion that's going to give you a lot more protection within that area. If you're refreshing toast, then it's going to cool down a lot quicker between mob packs. Depending on how sweaty, how hard you're running the dungeons, you could go up to 10 ward potions in a dungeon. Otherwise, if you're doing pugs, maybe just save it if it's getting a bit hairy. Heart runes. So you want a good balance of heart runes within the team. I usually like 3 deados, a vines, and a fire kick. If it's nature weak or they've got healing, bring maybe 1 or 2 bile. The last boss in Starstone and a need, the disease is really helpful there too, so you could also run a bile or 2 there. And then another tip for that too is Detonate doesn't land on Chartis, their last boss in Las, when he's down. So you want to look at taking Volt Kick, not Volt Kick, Firestorm Kick. You know what I'm saying. Your stat food, it's fine what works for you. Depending on your gear, try and hit those breakpoints. We'll talk about the breakpoints a little bit later. What am I doing? Talk about those breakpoints a little bit later, but let's say you're trying to hit 300 strength, 200 dex. Just use whatever food you need within your gear for that to work. So the next thing we're going to be looking at is our mob type weaknesses. So if you're unsure of what is in what dungeon, it's pretty basic. If you want to know, let's say you're running Dynasty this week, they are corrupted. So they're weak to Thrust, Arcane, and Nature. So things like Rapier, Spear, Horrific Bow, if you're going to go to that path. They're already 20% weak to Thrust, so for your gem wise, you'd be looking at diamonds or opals. If you're looking at a weapon like a hatchet, a void gauntlet, a Hatchet, Void Gauntlet, Ice Gauntlet. Then you could look at running your Arcane Gems in it for that added percentage. But if they're already weak to Thrust, or Strike, or Slash, then you don't want to be putting in these Elemental Gems because you're not going to get the same benefits out of it. Just keep an eye on that there as well. There's a couple little notes at the bottom there. Barnacles, Nerida, Angry Earth, and they're weak to Strike and Ice. And there's one that needs to be added in there too, which is the middle boss, is it Ifrit in the Imperium Forge. I'm pretty sure that's weak to Ice too, but I need to follow up on that. If you're confused about your armor weights, you've got everything here. Ideally, DPS and healer, you want to be in this light armor weight category. So if you've got bits and pieces of good armor you can put together, this is all the different combinations you can get there. Tank, you know, heavy. I'm never really a fan of medium for tanks or anything. I believe you should either be heavy or light. I don't often see a place for medium. Sometimes in the end of Barnacles I'll switch to a Siren set because it's for Angry Earth Ward with Elemental Aversion, and that pushes me into medium situations like that. Don't tend to go down that route. Now these recommended protection amulets. So depending on how deep you want to go with this, you can switch out pretty much whole sets. You can switch out just a couple pieces. This is going to help you survive easier with low con in these bosses. We've got all the different dungeons down here. There's a little bit of a color issue there. All your different dungeons. Each boss with recommended protections. So different bosses you may want to switch out between healer, tank, DPS. So for an example, let's say the last boss in Barnacles is a tank. I like running Thrust and Slash because I'm taking the brunt of the hits. I'm taking the front of those attacks. Whereas for the DPS at the back, it's easier for those to dodge those thrust attacks. So they might want to run Nature Protection. Same with the last boss in Gen. I like to run Slash Protection. DPS, they can run Nature Protection to protect them from the poison on the ground. So just a little basic thing here. Where it says protection amulets, you can actually switch out whole sets. So like Tempest, Isabella says Strike. Let's say you've got some extra pieces at a 625, you could switch out a couple more than just your amulet, some jewelry, and that'll help give you some extra protection. Hopefully that helps you guys a bit there. Alrighty, so the next session I'm going to go through is ideal team compositions. So you can see on the page here, we have some ideal team compositions with actually some heart rune options here for you. Just to give you a bit of an idea. So the tank, you're looking at either sword and shield or greatsword with a hammer. There are lots of other options. I like to try with all sorts. This is kind of your stock standard. So you're going to want to start, and then later on you can try experimenting with other stuff. Greatsword's really good to help with grouping with adaptive rupture, and it helps you not get stuck in the middle of packs as you can rush through it. Sword and shield offers a lot of weaken and rend to the team while also giving yourself a lot of survivability. Whether you're heavy or you're light sword and shield, you're going to be looking at different things. So on heavy, you're going to want elemental protection and ward on your shield with fortifying shield rush ideally. And then as a tank, a light tank, you're going to be wanting fortifying shield rush, and then you're going to want your damage perks. So vicious, enchanted, keenly jagged, maybe another bane, you could get another ward. There's a lot of options there, but with light, you're more looking at those damage options. Healer at the moment, you're pretty much Lifestaff Void Gauntlet. I hear about is it the flail coming? I don't really know much about that to have an opinion on it yet, but as it stands, Lifestaff Void Gauntlet. You're going to be looking at taking Blade, Oblivion, and then either Scream or Rupture. And ideally, you're running full AoE heals, Sacred Orb and Beacon. You drop your heals, couple of light attacks to get your refreshing back. Drop Oblivion, hop on the Blade, drop either your Scream or your Rupture, go through 1 or 2 rotations, then back on your heals to get your Sacreds back up for your team. Pretty easy. And then to your D3 DPS rolls, you've got Spear Great Axe, Greatsword Great Axe, which could also be Greatsword Hammer, and then Blood Rapier with either IG, VG or Fire Staff. At the moment, I'm liking VG more. It seems to add a lot more to the team. You can bring Tether, which helps in power cap you. You can help with Scream, Oblivion. It's very versatile. Especially in a pug group, if the healers aren't getting those empowers down, you can really help your team out. So if you're looking for kind of a stock standard build to run with some more sweaty players and pugs, I would probably look at going that spear greatsword great X route. You're always going to be valuable to a team, especially if you're on the spear, you're enfeebling spear with enfeebling maelstrom on that great X. You're always going to be valuable to your team. So that there, team composition is really important to a run going well. So just keep an eye on that. Next section here, we're going to be looking at DPS. Alrighty. So up the top here, we've got some gear requirements. Pretty basic. You're always going to want health on your amulet. 10% extra health. You don't really want to deviate from that. Elemental protection. So that is your ice, nature, fire, void. And if you are switching out for these bosses here, as we talked about earlier, you know, you can add your slash, your thrust, your strike into that as well. And then empowered, refreshing are probably your next option. Sometimes alacrity if you're doing skips, but these two are your must. Earring, 2 perk is fine. Beloved, refreshing toast. Beloved is going to help you not get aggro with that big DPS that you're going to be doing. Refreshing toast is going to help get those health potions and ward potions cooldowns up quicker. After that, you're going to be looking at purifying toast, refreshing. Try not get regenerating. I believe it creates extra threat. A little bit controversial at the moment. In the files it says it's got no threat added to it, but from real life playstyle, it seems to. Your ring. Rings change all the time, to be honest, so don't get too caught up on this. You want to want thrust or slash. It goes towards empower cap, so if you're running something like a spear or a great sword, it's not a biggie because you can easily get to that empowerment cap. So you can go leeching, thrust slash, bloodletting's really good with a great sword or a rapier. Hearty now with the dex changes, so if you're not hitting that 300 dex, you ideally want hearty. Keen awareness, that's pretty much the main things you're looking for. So leeching, hearty, keen awareness, thrust slash, and refreshing. Maybe bloodletting. It's kind of what you're looking for in a ring. Round shield, keen, enchanted, vicious, keenly jagged, all your damage perks. Now we come down, so all this is really based off of that other team composition. So you've got your greatsword, your spear, and your blood rapier. Here you have your skill trees. So all we do is we click on these skill trees and it'll bring us to the page. So for the greatsword one, we have these skill trees here. What I might do is we'll go through some rotations later to show you how to ideally run this. If it's a nature week, you can take Sickening Slash, so you can take a couple points out here, move into Sickening Slash, and that'll help give you a team. These. Now when it comes to the spear, it's nothing too crazy. You're this here. If you're running a second spear on a team and you have someone with sweep, you can actually switch out to Cyclone with Leeching Cyclone. A lot of survivability and actually does a lot of damage in dungeons that are weak to strike, like Laz. Over here we have Roger's Blood Rapier. This is big damage, but it is an expensive build to set up, and it actually takes quite a lot of skill to get effective damage out of it. So we'll go over this rotation later as well. We have our attribute points, our weapon perks, armor perks. So at the moment, before season 3, we're looking at Bane on everything. I don't care what it is, unless it's a ability offhand. All your main hands, you want Bane. Second perk, you want your damage multiple. So Trenchant Strikes on a greatsword, because you're always going to be heavy attacking. You're the only spear on a team in Enfeebling Skewer. Got a good team, you can get away without it, but you might as well have it. So Bane, Enfeebling Skewer, then you'd be looking at Vicious or Rogue. If you're not running Enfeebling Skewer, then you would go Bane, Vicious, or Rogue, and then you'd look at something like Attunement, Bleeding Sweep, Keenly Jagged would be what else you'd be looking for there. Blood Rapier. Now this one's important to have 3. So there's Bane, Vicious, Keenly Empowered, but with them adding Grit to Flurry, there's a good argument to have Thwarting Strikes. but you need a decent amount of refreshing. So you're probably looking at least 4 or 5 refreshing to get the most use out of that. So ideally, if you're just starting, you can go for your Bane, your Vicious, Thwarting Strikes, but with Blood Rapier being Empower starved, you really do want that keenly empowered. Leeching Flurry and King Tondo is a must. Leeching Flurry is what's going to be keeping you alive. And really, any build should have King Tondo on it. Because if you've got a Rapier in the team, everyone in the team benefits from that. So try and get a piece in your sets with King Tondo on it. Spear, you can get Fortifying, Perforate, and Bleeding Sweep. To be honest, not super important. The Bleeding Sweep is going to be some nice extra damage. Fortifying, Perforate's not going to do a whole lot with the Fortify changes in light. Greatsword, so we're kind of going around and back here. Greatsword, Relentless Freedom, super important, and things like Nature and Ice. That's what's going to get you out when you're rooted down to the ground or if you're stuck. Slowing Rupture, I wouldn't really worry about it, to be honest. Some notes here on the gems and bits and pieces if you want them. Hatchet's actually going to be quite big again, I think. This skill tree is pretty much correct. You could switch Infected Throw for Rending Throw. It's kind of 50-50, whichever one you prefer. But with the Hatchet now, instead of running Defy Death, we're running the right hand Persistence Hindrance, which helps keep you in power caps, because you've pretty much always got 4 debuffs on a enemy. So that's going to give you an extra 12% in power right there. Hatchet and Forge, Gen, stuff like that is actually quite strong. Where are we? Sword and Shield as a DPS. It's okay. I wouldn't be running Sword and Shield if your tank is running Sword and Shield. If you want to run Pugs, it's fine. It's okay. You can have some fun. It's not high level though. Void Gauntlet, you can go Void Gauntlet main hand with something like an Ice Gauntlet offhand. It's pretty decent damage in things like Laz, Starstone, stuff like that. But generally it's probably at the lower end of the DPS scale there. But I would probably have it above Sword and Shield. Offhands, Great Axe, Warhammer, Blunderbuss, Spear, Ice Gauntlet, and Hatchet. Great Axe is going to be your biggest friend in a dungeon grouping. So when it comes to dungeons, you want everything grouped as tight as possible, because then you're effectively fighting one mob at a time. You want at least 1 Great Axe. If you can have 2, great. We want Reap. I see a lot of people running Charge. So you want Grabwell, Maelstrom, Reap. Ideally, you want everything as tight as possible. There is a Charge build in here too. It's mainly for skips. So this is like speedrun strat going skips. Most of you guys are going to want Reap. It's just going to help with your grouping so much more. Are we running Bloodlust? Yes, we're running Bloodlust. So when you're running around, if you've got your Great Axe out, you're going to get 20% haste. So might as well keep that Great Axe out. Warhammer. So a lot of people get confused having a Warhammer as a DPS. You're not using it to DPS with. You are assisting with CC to keep clumps tight. You are using Armor Breaker and Shockwave to help keep Rens up, and that's pretty much it. If it starts getting a bit hairy for your team, that's when you want to pull the hammer out, try and get some stuns off. The tank's stuck. If you're about to die, just get on that hammer, get some stuns off. You'll get some self-healing. And keep those Rens up, because you get 30% Ren from Armor Breaker. It's huge, but you're not DPSing with it. You're not heavy attacking, you're not light attacking, you're just using your abilities. That's where there's a lot of confusion around that. Blunderbuss, to be honest, I can't tell you much about Blunderbuss. I don't really use it. So I think Mags and Hroga might have added this one in here. I think it's more as a burst ability. So you have it as an offhand on some bosses and bits and pieces. Or in Nature Week, you can use Plague Splitting Grenades. You're not main-handing it. It's just there for some burst damage. Not used very often. It's kind of a niche one. Spear offhand. If you don't have a main spear, you could look at using spear offhand with your greatsword. You could use an enfeebling offhand, just help keep those enfeebles up. With the spear rotations, when you're maining it too, you ideally want to do 2 light attacks and then use an ability. So you'll open up with your enfeebling skewer, 2 light attacks, then perforate, 2 light attacks, sweep or cyclone, and that will keep your ability cycling as well. Ice Gauntlet is an offhand. It's basically just burst damage. So opening this up, we got Ice Spike, we got Ice Storm, and we got Ice Shower. So Ice Shower we're going to use to help with your clumping when you're doing big pulls to help ball everything up. Then you're pretty much Ice Storm, dodge back, Ice Spike. It gives you a bit of a DPS when you're on the Rapier and you need to back out for a second to heal up. It's pretty big DPS. You can switch out for Ice Pylon as well, which helps. That's pretty much what you're adding to the team with the Ice Gauntlet. It's just spike damage. Especially in a silence week as well with the Rapier. Sometimes you need to back out and it allows you to still get some good DPS down from outside of the clump. Hatchet, you can use Hatchet as an offhand on bosses usually to help keep up rends or disease with the infected throw. Don't go running Greatsword Hatchet in a dungeon. You're not offering anything to the team. Choose one or the other. Offhand wise for Hatchet, it's a boss thing. Alrighty, so coming to the healer section of this now. Similar gear requirements at the top here. Health, elemental protection, and then you're looking at empowered refreshing, same as the DPS. Earring, beloved, refreshing toast, same as the DPS, and then I would probably put refreshing over purifying toast. Unless it's in nature or an ice week, then you're really going to want that purifying toast as your third. Ring, sacred, hardy is a must, and then you're looking at keen awareness, refreshing, and leeching. I'd probably put in that order: keen awareness, refreshing, leeching. But if you need to choose a two perker, sacred and hearty. So as you can see, a lot of different builds here for a healer. We have our life staff and we have our void gauntlet. So we have our healing builds here if you need them. Sacred Ground, Orb of Protection, Beacon. I personally usually open up with Orb of Protection into Sacred, into Beacon, and then I do about 2 or 3 light attacks and then move on to my Void Gauntlet rotation, and then by the time I can get through sort of 2 rotations of that, getting Oblivions down, then you're looking at getting your Sacred back up. With Orb of Protection, because the cooldown's so low, if you're having to stand back a bit for the heals, don't be afraid to put that on yourself. If you need the heals from further away, that's going to be your go-to. Or if you're playing at a pug and you've got range DPS, Orb of Protection, that goes on them. It's only a 6-second cooldown, so that's nice. Void Gauntlet. So it looks like we've got 2 skill trees here. I'm not sure what we got going here. So I've got pretty standard Void Blade, Oblivion, and Essence Rupture on this one. This one's a hot swap. So let's talk about this one first. So Void Blade's going to make your main DPS as a healer. It gives you a lot of rends and it gives you a lot of cooldown reduction. Oblivion needs to be down as much as possible. As a healer, you want to keep Oblivion down just as much as you want to keep Sacred down. That empowers your entire team and weakens the enemy mobs. So with Void Blade, that helps you keep up that Oblivion time with the cooldowns. And then Essence Rupture, you want to keep that on your most powerful kind of enemies. So name mobs and bosses, and then from there just normal pack mobs. That's going to give your team a lot of self-healing with that. The harder option, which is kind of better, is this one, which you run Scream as well, which helps lock things down after a grab well. Please don't scream before a grab well, it's very frustrating. Wait for that grouping, the grab well, the ruptures from your great swords, scream them in place, Oblivion, get on that blade. You should get Scream and Oblivion up again and then get back to the heals. What we've got Rupture here for is to hot swap at bosses. So what you would quickly do at bosses is you'd switch Putrefying Scream to Essence Rupture, which will help give them a lot of self-healing. There's a couple times you want to keep Putrefying Scream, so the last boss in need, because you can stop them coming back with full health with the disease from Putrefying Scream, and same with the last boss in Starstone. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. If you want something a little bit more simple, you could also just go for the Putrefying Scream build. So you'll take out Essence Rupture and Invigorating Rupture, and I would probably take Refreshing Precision and Forsaken Pack instead. You could take Invigorating Oblivion if you wanted as well. I think you would take rid of Cleansing Harvest and take Invigorating Oblivion if you wanted. That is that there. Moving on to tanks. This is a long video, by the way, guys, but this is actually just a shallow intro to it. If this goes down well, people enjoy it, it's helpful, I can look at doing some more in-depth stuff. Gear requirements, same as everything else. Health, elemental protection, I like fortified or divine. Empowered and refreshing is also very good. Fortified is very nice though. Gearing, you want despised. It's going to help you keep threat. The biggest hate of anyone in a pug is a tank that cannot keep threat and not keep aggro. So please, please, please run despised and refreshing toast. Then you're looking at your putrefying toast. Let's just extend this out a little bit, eh? Purifying toast and refreshing, just like the other ones. Your ring, we've got Legates and Simon's Hack Silver Ring. Pretty much you can always run Simon's Hack Silver Ring. Now with the dex changes, you're going to want that hardy anyway. And it's quite easy to get. You can get multiples of it, so you can run multiple gems for boss switches and etc. So that's kind of my recommendation. If you can't get that, then maybe go for a Legates ring. Tower shields, you're going to want your mob ward, your elemental protection, and your fortifying shield rush. If you get that, you're running full heavy. You'll basically take 0 damage when it comes to the elemental side of the from the mobs, which is actually kind of crazy. You're so tanky with this. When it comes to light tanking, you can get second Bane with enchanted or vicious. You are happy days. And the fortifying shield rush, which isn't as important in light because it doesn't make as much of a difference. All right. Now, when it comes to main hand weapons, we've got Greatsword, Sword and Shield, Warhammer, offhands or niche options, Spear, Great Axe, Rapier. Greatsword and Sword and Shield are going to be your main hands, with Warhammer as your offhand. What I've got here is Warhammer, although hammer has always been used as an offhand, think of it as your main hand in clumps. So with the two light attack build, you want to use a shockwave, 2 light attacks, clear out, 2 light attacks, shockwave. Depending on how tight the clump is, you want to get really quick cooldowns. The other option is if you have another hammer offhand, so let's say you've got a greatsword hammer, you drop armor breaker for wrecking ball, and you can basically perma CC anything in the clump. Clear out shouldn't knock things back too much. There's a few things in corrupted area like the mages, what do you call them, the maidens in Dynasty and Tempest, that will send them flying, which can be annoying, but you can actually use it to your advantage as well. So if they're stuck in a silent circle or something like that, you can actually clear out and bop them out of the circle. Or the 2 maidens that spawn by the big knight in Dynasty, you can actually use it to push them back together. Just careful how you use it with them. Hammer is amazing as a tank. You can run so much less con if once you get that CC lockdown, because nobody gets hit. Now, the other decision you need to make is between Sword and Shield and Greatsword. They've both got their ups and downs. Sword and Shield will give you leadership, which is a 10% in power to the team, which isn't a big deal on, like we've talked about before, Spear, Greatsword, and Void Gauntlet. But it depends on your team also. So if your healer is not getting their empowerments down, it actually makes a bigger deal. So you can kind of think of it around that too. If you're running heavy with that tower shield setup that we were talking about before, the ward and elemental protection, you're almost unkillable. And with Whirling Blade, it gives your team a lot of rend too. So I really like where Sword and Shield is sitting at with that. Greatsword though is also amazing. So you can rush through mobs, use your Adaptive Rupture to suck everything in to get an initial grouping. Then you can use your Calamity Counter to kind of survive until that grab and the Sacred comes down, and then you can switch back to your hammer to start CCing. So I might try and get you guys some footage on that. We'll have a look. It's just different playstyles really. Calamity Counter is a really quick taunt when you run the refreshing move side on the skill tree. We'll bring it up. The skill tree is slightly different actually to what I run. So we reset this. Right. We'll do it later. So I like running the Unrelenting Onslaught, which gives us the cooldowns. Means you actually get really quick cooldowns on that taunt. Now, there's a couple of niche options that you can play around with. Spear, Great Axe, Rapier. They're kind of just fun. Great Axe Hammer can be quite a fun setup on a tank, especially in a pug where there's not really much grouping. Doesn't give a lot of survivability, and it can be quite hard to get those grab wells off when you're in a clump. With the spear as well, it's actually really nice. If you're heavy spear with fortifying perforate, leeching cyclone, or sweep, yeah, it's quite fun. You can CC lock it, you get a lot of extra protection from that fortifier. It's fun. And same with rapier. It doesn't add a whole lot to the team, but with flurry getting grit now, there's an argument for maybe a light tank rapier could be some decent damage running an evade rapier, or a blood rapier with your main rapier running evade, and then you are popping their bleed. So there's something you can play around with there. But yeah, a little bit niche. Stick to these three. Choose between your greatsword and your sword and shield, whichever you prefer, and then your hammer. So greatsword, same as a DPS, you're going to want your bane and your trenchant strikes. Please get relentless freedom. It's hard to beat. Sword and shield, bane, enchanted, refreshing move, life stealing. You can also go vicious. I've actually put a trenchant strikes build together for corrupted as well. So you go bane, trenchant strikes, you go 300 strength, and it does quite a lot of damage. Armor perks, Willing Blade, Shield Rush. They're nice to have. They're not necessary. They're nice haves. Warhammer, you don't need anything. You ideally want Sundering Shockwave on your hammer and Bane. To be honest, you don't even need Bane. Really, if you're just starting off and you're struggling, it's got Sundering Shockwave on it, you're gonna be okay. The Thwarting Strikes Sash Enchanted. If you're not 300 con, you don't really want the Thwarting Strikes. So there is our insight into tank. Alrighty, so we're not going to go too deep on this today, but if you guys need any help with sandworm or hatchery stuff, there is a couple spreadsheets on there too. To be honest, the hatchery one is probably a bit over the top, but I love putting team compositions together. I think it makes such a difference. And it just makes the whole thing go smooth. So if you've got a group you're getting together, try and get something like this, it's going to go a lot smoother. You don't have to have the rapiers, you can change those for greatsword or whatever, but this is just a good breakdown of keeping your rends up, different bleeds, bits and pieces. So I really like this. Sandworm. Most sandworm teams are pretty standard now. So this is pretty much it. I think there's a couple and bits and pieces on it, but I don't have access to edit that on the M11 website anymore, so if there is, I'm sorry. So I'm hoping this helped you guys out a little bit. Let me know if there's anything else you guys want to see. I might get some footage of rotations and bits and pieces on the greatsword spear to go through that with you guys, but if there's anything we're missing, just let me know and we can make a video on that.